Hello everyone. My name is Louise Cridland, and you may have detected an accent already. I am from Sydney, Australia, and I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to go through today. It is very close to my heart, and we will be talking a lot about our heart and our intuition. So, what I've found over the years being a holistic psychologist with my own practice and then also with working with clients is that we're all seeking confidence. And, hands up, I've also been there, wanting to chase confidence so that we can then feel more confident to do the things that we really want to do in this life. What I've found is we actually need to live an unconventional life led by our heart, our intuition, and most of all, our courage. And that is what we're going to be speaking about today. So to put your brains at ease, we are going to go through a simple process of what we're going to be talking about, why we're going to be talking about it, and then how and what next. So the what is what I've touched on already before. Around almost every client comes to me wanting greater confidence, and it's actually courage that truly drives transformation. We're also going to go through 3 steps on how to build courage instead of chasing confidence. You'll also discover how to align with your heart, gut, and intuition to really find greater clarity and to take bold action towards your dreams, towards what you're really here for in this incredible life that you've been given. We'll also go through uncovering any areas where you may be holding yourself back and create some actionable steps to overcome indecision and hesitation. So this is your chance to really build lasting courage so you can step into your full potential, inspire others. And this is when it gets exciting. When you really step up and start living your purpose and living your full potential, it starts to inspire the people around you, and it also helps you attract the certain people that will bring other opportunities into your life. So it's also all about living a life that's true to you. So before we go into that, why courage is so important is that confidence is actually driven by our minds. And this might seem a little bit strange, but confidence is something that it's harder to create a lasting supply of confidence, and it's easily shaken. Instead, courage really comes from our heart, comes from our gut instincts, and it comes from our intuition. So it's something that we can keep tapping into. So it has a lot more potential than simply trying to create more confidence. And the best thing about this is the more courageous we become, the more confident we become as well. Before we go into the why, I just want to tell you a little bit about me so you know who is speaking to you today. And this all really started, I won't go through my whole life history, but it is important to take you back just a little bit. So when I was about 6, you can see that picture on the screen there. Just picture yourself in a little kid's classroom. They have little chairs. I think from memory, these were little red chairs that we were all sitting on. I was surrounded by my friends, and we were sitting at those tiny little desks in those kids' classrooms. So our task was to create an artwork, and we had been given different colouring in sheets to do this. I was colouring away, and being creative really was my escape back then, and even to this day as well. I had just about finished, and we call it in Australia a relief teacher, but a teacher you don't have all the time, but they step in when your usual teacher is sick. His name was Mr. Marks, and he was known to be really scary and really intimidating, and we were all terrified of him. So there I was finishing my artwork, and I noticed he's come up behind me. And in his stern voice, he said to me, "Why did you just waste that piece of paper?" In that moment, I completely froze. My cheeks burned. I felt so ashamed. I felt so ashamed that he had criticized my work. But what I didn't realize at the time, it went so much deeper than that. This was one of the first times I started to hide parts of myself that I felt were not good enough, that didn't fit the mold, that didn't fit what others expected of me. And this really, my creativity really took a hit, but at a deeper level, it was my self-esteem and how I expressed myself in the world really got shaken. And it didn't end there. And this pressure to conform really kept continuing throughout my schooling and then into my professional life. And you can see on the screen there, I kept getting the same messages. Stay inside the lines, fit the mold, don't be different. I remember one of the last bosses that I had before I started my own business. He said, "You'll only ever be a good psychologist if you don't pursue senior management." And we're going to start to talk about a head and a heart voice, but I'll just give you an example. Had I followed what he said to me, that would be an example of your head voice. Okay, I should pursue senior management. I'll make more money. That's what's expected of me. But I didn't, because I followed something deep within me, and it was a knowing. It was a feeling like to do that would make me, well, it actually made me feel sick. The thought of staying longer for longer hours in the office, in the bright lights, commuting, I just knew that wasn't for me. The breaking point began when I was just before 30, and I was completely lost. On paper, I'd done everything right. I had a predictable, safe career as a psychologist. I had done all the right things. I went to school, went to uni, got a job. But deep down, I felt empty, and this life that I was leading didn't feel like mine. And I remember being in my childhood room at the time and looking around at all my possessions and feeling really lost. I didn't know what the next step would be. But this is what I realized on that evening. And this led into the surrender, because I realized I could no longer keep running. I could no longer keep running from what I was feeling inside, and I had been running for a long time. I had been pushing down, avoiding, distracting, numbing my emotions any chance I could get. But I also knew deep down I had to start listening to that inner voice that we have from a really young age, but we stop listening to. And I had to stop trying to be what and who others expected of me. And so this led me down into a 15-year journey of becoming obsessed with transformation. And it really was a journey back to myself and starting to listen and hear my intuition again and following my heart, even though it may not have been approved of or it wasn't expected of me. So through these years, I learned how to connect back into my body's wisdom, not just my head. Start to listen to the signals that we get from our body. And one of the best things I realized was that my struggles were not my flaws. They were clues. I realized my multifaceted nature, which was often criticized as I grew up, was actually one of my gifts. And this leads me to where I am today, which is my mission, to help people reconnect back into that inner voice, their intuition, because it's that voice, it's that courage that will lead them to where they want to go. I also know what it was like when I wasn't listening to my intuition, and the amount of time I've spent wasted on overthinking and doubting myself and not taking action. And then now the freedom that I feel and the knowing that when I listen to my intuition, it's taking me down the right path. So can I ask you one thing? Can you keep an open mind for what we're going to talk about today? It may be a little bit different to what you've heard a psychologist talking about before. But the best way to approach these things is to keep an open mind and see what's for you and what might not be for you. The way I work with clients is not a specialized process. It's not a cookie cutter process, because we are all individual and we have to find our own ways of how we listen and can hear our intuition. So by the end of today's presentation, you'll understand how to break free from those limiting beliefs, trust your intuition, and align with your true self, so you can step into a life of bold, unapologetic you-ness, fueled by clarity, purpose, and courage. One thing I've really realized, and funnily enough, being a psychologist trained in the mind, I've realized that we have to go beyond our minds. We have to go beyond our conditioning, societal pressures, our responsibilities to really live a life that's true to us. And this is where courage comes in. Courage is what allows us to express our true voice, and it doesn't prevent us from taking action. Whereas sometimes when we focus on confidence, we feel like we need a certain amount of confidence before we can actually take action. So let's dive in. So the 3 steps to building more courage we're about to go through. The first one is breaking free from conditioning, trusting your inner voice, and then living aligned to your purpose and reclaiming your power. And I'm going to go through all of these now. So for our brains, it's really important to understand why something is important, why a topic is important. Why do we need to learn about these things? Well, breaking free from conditioning is really about when we're conditioned, we are not our incredible original selves, and it actually prevents real fulfillment when we're living by someone else's standards, by someone else's expectations. And when you're no longer weighed down by the fear of judgment or stuck in other people's rules, you're really free to take action towards what you're really desiring. Step 2 is about trusting your intuition, trusting your inner voice, your heart voice, which I'm going to explain soon. So starting to listen to your intuition will help you break free from self-doubt, step out of your comfort zone, and embrace the unknown. Again, all of these things help us to take action towards the life we want. And living on purpose and reclaiming our power, I'm excited to talk about this because it's really the foundation of how you can express yourself in a way that's true to you. So let's get stuck in. So how can we break free from conditioning? How do we do this? Remember at the start, I talked about the what, the why, and now we're in the how. How can you actually break free from conditioning? Firstly, you need to identify what your limiting beliefs are. And you need to identify that you've actually absorbed these from your external environment, from your parents, from the education system, from the media. And so often these beliefs that are running under often our conscious awareness, they're actually running how we make decisions and the behavior that we take, the action that we take. So we need to understand what our stories are. We need to understand and listen and identify when that inner critic, that inner critical voice is really spinning you stories that do not serve you. So get your pen and paper handy. You can pause it if you don't have any paper or pen. You can also go to your worksheets at this time, where the questions will also be in the worksheet. So I want you to reflect on these questions. Can you think about your inner critic, that inner critical voice that you hear all the time? What does it say to you? Some examples could be, who am I to do this presentation? Who am I to put my hand up for something that I'm really passionate about? Am I knowledgeable enough? Or things like my clients often say, I'm selfish to pursue my passion. Or how can I make money out of my passion? Or any sort of what if scenarios. So I want you now to take a couple of minutes and I want you to write down 5 stories or thoughts that your inner critic, that inner critical voice says to you. For some of you, this will be easy. And for some of you who haven't done this sort of thing before, it may be hard. And the thing about this is often we are fused, we are meshed with our inner critical voice so that we don't even notice or identify that we are separate from it. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to ask yourself, how does your inner critic speak to you? If you don't have time to do the five things that you can identify that it says to you that is critical, just try one. And I want you to write that one down on your piece of paper. Okay, you got it? All right. Once you've got a thought, you've identified that your inner critic tends to say these things, I want you to now, from this point onwards, notice whenever that story or that thought pops into your head. And I want you to notice how you feel. Do you believe it? And if you believe it, how does this impact how you think, feel, and then behave? So after this presentation, you can come back to this and start to think more deeply. But for now, I just want you to acknowledge that you've got an inner critic, to have written down one thing that it says to you, and then start to notice how this plays out in your life. And we're going to come back to this at the end. So let's move on to trusting your inner voice. This is one of my favorite steps. I love helping people reconnect with their intuition because it just makes life so much more exciting. The first foundation of starting to strengthen your intuition is starting to embrace silence. This was one of the tools that I first learnt to use in my own life, and you know what? It's free. But I was so scared to be on my own. I was so scared to be with my thoughts or my emotions, and I really struggled to be in silence. But once I realized and I committed to taking some time out, whether it's meditation, slowing down and journaling, it's really figuring out what works best for you and what feels doable at this stage in your life. It doesn't have to be that long. It could even be 5 minutes to begin with. But if you don't have that foundation of silence or slowing down or reflective practice, you will keep being pulled into your head. keep being pulled into the thinking. And the thinking is very difficult because you're getting influences from the media, from your past, and it's very hard to hear that inner knowing, that inner voice. And the next step, once you do start to practice the silence in whatever form, I want you to start identifying the voice that we've talked about. Is it your head or is it your heart voice? I was introduced to this concept of the heart and the head voice by Light Watkins. It's a very simple idea, and it's a great stepping stone for when you're trying to strengthen your intuition. So just quickly, your head voice. It's all about fear. It's trying to keep you safe. It's the what ifs. It's the I need more money before I can do this. It's the anything related to an anxious type thought. And then you have the heart voice. It might be calmer, a bit more reflective. It could be a feeling or being moved or a desire. And this leads us into the signs of intuition. Everyone is different. So I'm going to use these terms, the heart voice or intuition, interchangeably. But essentially, when you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter what we're calling it, but it's just starting to notice, when is it fear, head voice, or when is it my heart voice? So I'm going to read out some things now. Oh, there we go. I want you to write down, get your pen and paper and go to the worksheets. I want you to write down how you hear your heart voice. How do you hear your intuition speaking to you? So I'm going to give you some ideas. So your intuition can look or feel like, it could be a feeling. So remember when I said the thought of pursuing senior management or staying in an office 9 to 5, 40 plus hours a week, it made me viscerally, it made me sick. Made me sick in my body. And that's a feeling, it's a sense. So start to pay attention to the sensations in your body, a feeling, a desire for change. Any sort of desire is pointing you towards your heart voice. It could even be an instant download. It could be a yes, I really want to do that. It could be being pulled to something or wanting to do something without knowing why. And a good indication it's your heart voice or it's your intuition is that you don't have a logical explanation for it. It could be excitement. It could be feeling lit up. It could be feeling like your heart has made the decision. It's also noticing a difference between the heart and the head voice. So you might start to notice your heart's like, yes, I would love to start my own business. And then your head voice comes in, oh, but how will you do that? What if you don't make money? What if they're this? What if they're that? So that's when you can start to notice the head voice is trying to control, and it's based on what ifs and it's based on fear usually. Another good example was when I was talking to a friend the other day. She's really struggling with her career. And she listened to a podcast and she felt so inspired. And during or right after the podcast, she had this thought, I just want to chuck it all in and start again. And when she told me that, I was like, that is your heart voice. And often our head voice chimes in so quickly. How are you going to do that? You can't just leave your job. You've got all these responsibilities. And so we don't pay much attention to that initial thought, that initial bit of intuition before our head voice comes in and controls and just wipes it out. Another way is a knowing, being moved, like in that example I just described, or things coming up in your dreams. That can also be a great little breadcrumb to starting to give you some signs of what your intuition is trying to guide you towards. It could also be seeing something at work or in your emails that makes you really interested. something showing up in your social feeds, again, when you've got this feeling or being moved by something. And when you're going through this process, it's really about trying to get out of your head. There is no right or wrong. We just have to practice. So I want you to write down, now you've heard some of those examples, I want you to take 1 minute and I want you to write down, how does your intuition speak to you? Just as many as you can with 1 minute. Now I want you to write down, what are some barriers to hearing your intuition? What blocks your intuition? Again, we don't need a minute for this, but what's your instant sort of thought when you think about what might be blocking your intuition? Just write that down now. We're going to come back to this right at the end as well. And I do encourage you to come back to this after we finish the presentation to give more thought to some of these things. And from today onwards, I want you to start tracking your heart voice, tracking how your intuition speaks to you, and write it down. And in the beginning, you'll probably be getting your head voice still and ideas that are coming from other people or society, and that's okay. That is why we start to track these things and start to get a sense of, yes, that was my intuition. All right, so the final step, living aligned to your purpose and reclaiming your power. So living aligned with our purpose is very simply defining what truly matters to you. And if we don't know our values, our passions, the things that make us feel the most alive, then we can't actually live a life that is led by our desires. We will never be fully fulfilled if we don't know what our values are. So get your pen and paper ready. I'm going to ask you some questions. So, what do you spend most of your time thinking about? And I want you to come up with your initial responses. After the presentation, it would be really great for you to note down 4, but for today's presentation, I just want you to think about a couple of things that instantly come to your mind. So what do you spend most of your time thinking about? And don't limit this just to your work or career, just anything, personal and work, purpose, passion, all of it. Now, what do you spend most of your money on? And when thinking of money or wanting more money, what do you honestly and authentically want to use it for? And when you find yourself in a moment of stillness, what subjects come to mind? What do you daydream about? Again, don't limit yourself. This could be really almost seem a bit strange or insignificant, but it never is. So just anything that you seem to daydream about. And when it comes to your time online, what do you love to learn most about? What are you researching? What are the pages that you're saving on Instagram? What are the blogs that you read? Again, just coming back to your instant gut reaction and writing one thing down. Now thinking about your childhood, what were the things you loved or cared about as a kid? Don't limit yourself. It's just anything here. What could you spend hours doing? What did you love as a kid? The last question before we move on, what activities, hobbies, and passions make you feel most alive? And again, this could be random. This could be a random sport, or it could be a certain type of book. Just write anything down about activities, hobbies, and passions that make you feel most alive. So once you've done that, let's move on. So what gets us or gets in the way of us pursuing our passions and our purpose? And often that is when we are leaking our power and we're not claiming our power. And we leak our energy all the time, day to day. And so I want to ask some questions around how you might be leaking your energy and your power day to day. So you can go to your worksheets and the questions are there as well. The big question here is, where are you settling in your life? Now, if you honestly answer this is not going to be an easy question to answer, because we spend so much of our time avoiding what's painful. And often what's painful is actually where we're settling. So you might need to pause the presentation to really go deep on this question. But just for now, I want you to think about the first one or two things that comes to your mind. Where are you settling? Think relationships, career, purpose, passion. There are also some good indicators of behaviors to know where you are also leaking your power. And I want you to answer these next questions. So do you do any of the following? Overcommitting. So saying yes to things you don't really want to do, just to avoid guilt or disappointing others. Do you people please? Prioritizing other people's needs over yours. What about overthinking? Do you waste energy on the what ifs and get pulled into scenarios a lot? And what about living out of alignment? So spending time on work, relationships, habits that really don't align with who you are or what lights you up. The last one's a big one. What about emotions? Do you block them? Do you numb them, distract, avoid? Bottling up any of these emotions instead of addressing them and dealing with them is a major leak to our energy. Because if you think about it, if we're suppressing or avoiding or distracting, we are taking energy to push them down or to push them away. So to become the most empowered version of ourselves, we need to understand where our energy leaks day to day. Okay, to summarize, so we've talked about 3 steps to building more courage, and that's about breaking free from conditioning and identifying how our inner critic is playing out day to day, and then how that impacts our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors and actions. The second step was how you can listen to your inner voice by slowing down and getting to know how your intuition speaks to you. And lastly, the third step was about living your purpose and reclaiming your power. So this is about knowing what lights you up and also where you're leaking your energy and your power day to day. So if we're going to pull it all together, I want you to write these things down. Again, instant gut reaction. And if you need more time, that's totally fine. You can always come back to this. So what did you learn about your inner critical voice today? What did you learn about how your intuition speaks to you? And what did you learn about your purpose and how you're giving away your power? So to finish off, and this is the what next step. So we can learn and learn and learn, but it will only be knowledge, and it won't translate into action, and it won't translate into living the life that we're here to live. So what's one thing that you'll commit to doing differently from today? What's the one thing? What does your intuition tell you about this one thing or this next step? So a little bit about me. I'm a holistic psychologist with over 12 years experience as a mindset mentor. And as you can tell from today, I really love reconnecting people with their intuition, reconnecting with that fire, that courageous fire within themselves, so that they can no longer waste time on anxiety and overthinking and self-doubt. And the big one, so they no longer are wasting time second guessing themselves. We are so powerful when we tap into our intuition. And this is really the foundation of how I help people. Get them tapping into their intuition so then they can then take bold action in their lives. And from that point, they are then having a ripple effect in the community by inspiring others to also live true to themselves. So you can reach me on my website. You can follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'd really love to connect with you. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out. And I hope leaving you with that question about what's that one thing you're going to commit to do today. I want you to take time to think about that, so you can start moving towards the life that you are here to live. Thank you so much. It's been so great to talk about this topic. I could talk about it all day long. I really hope you found some valuable information, but more importantly, I hope you've had some insights. I hope we've started to get your intuition pumping so that you can start to listen and take action.